Well, hello and welcome to Drones in the Wild. I'm Rob and we're going to talk about some drone issues today. Right now we are in DeBay's Wildlife Preserve and we'll be taking a look around that as well. However, before we start, we're going to take a few minutes to talk about some issues. Now, next week I'm actually going to go to a meetup of drone enthusiasts here in the Seattle area, and it'll be interesting for me because even though I've operated drones for a while, I have yet to actually see one operated by someone else. So that'll be interesting to see when I get to that meetup and actually see other drones operating, because it's a apparent scourge on society and I just haven't seen it. You know, I fly my drones. However, a lot of the issues that come up don't really apply so much to the way I fly, just because I tend to fly in wilderness areas, rural areas, things like that, which kind of avoids a lot of the issues and concerns that are happening. I also, if I am operating within 5 miles of a small airport, I will notify the airport and coordinate with them. That doesn't happen very often though. Usually I'm out in the boonies, as I am today. But it gets to some of the issues, and one thing I'm going to show today is what does the drone see at different altitudes, because there's a lot of misconceptions out there as to the privacy invading qualities of drones. In reality, most consumer drones, if not all, have very wide angle lenses, and even when they are capable, as mine is, with 4K video, it just is too wide of an angle lens to actually see anything in detail unless it's really close. There are other issues involved though, however. I don't think that there's really much of a risk of privacy invasion with drones, unless the operator is acting incredibly unreasonably and flying at, 20 feet above someone's house. However, even in those cases though, it's not really going to see much. It can't look inside windows. It just isn't really that much of an issue with privacy in general. However, there is one issue that drone operators really need to take care of as far as their business goes. And that's drones do make noise and they are in the air. So when you are flying over someone's property, one, you should be high enough that you can't really gather any personal information on them. And a person's location is personal information. So if you're high enough that you can't identify people on the ground, there should be no issues with privacy. Because the one element of personal information that a drone can collect is a person's location outside, if the drone is close enough to actually identify them. Probably even more important though is that drones do make noise, and a lot of people want their peace and quiet. So when flying over someone's property, one, you shouldn't be hovering over someone's personal property. But if you're overflying someone's personal property, as if an airplane or a helicopter would, you should be at an altitude that you are not an annoyance in terms of the sound coming from the drone. Now, drones do make noise. They usually sound like a swarm of bees. However, a drone at 100 or 200 feet is probably equivalent in sound to an airplane flying over at a couple thousand feet. So some common courtesy is probably due from any drone operator, because people, especially in a quieter area, will want their peace and quiet. There are some scenarios, if I'm over the water and there's boats operating, the boats are far louder than the drone ever will be. So I'm not really concerned about it, and I can actually comfortably and with no guilt fly at fairly low altitudes over water. The other thing about flying over water, and I kind of really like flying over water, is because from a safety perspective, the chances of the drone somehow developing a malfunction and dropping out of the sky, the chances of them actually falling on something are slim to none. The real risk is actually for the drone operator, because if your drone falls in the water, that's all she wrote. You lost that drone. And certainly if it's salt water, you just might as well just leave it down there, because it's not, you will never recover anything off of that drone. So there is a risk involved in flying over water, but the risk is more for the drone operator, not the people around. So I just wanted to make some of those issues clear, and you'll see that in a few minutes as I take the drone up to 100, 150, 200 feet, and you'll see what I look like from those altitudes, and you're going to find that I'm pretty small. So the issue really from a privacy perspective probably is a non-issue, simply because there are far better ways to invade someone's privacy, whether it's, you know, being in a second story room with a long telephoto lens, or even carrying your cell phone inside someone else's home gives you the ability to take pictures inside their home. These are far more invasive intrusions on privacy, or potential intrusions on privacy. And to be honest, anybody using a drone for stalking or things like that probably is not using the right tool. So I'll leave it at that. However, courtesy among drone operators does say, you know what, if you're in a rural area like I am right now and there's people around, they may want some peace and quiet. So don't buzz them. In fact, even, you know, if you see people who may want some peace and quiet, hey, raise your altitude a little bit so that the drone is pretty quiet. Depending on what ambient noise is, drones generally will fade out pretty quickly. And, you know, if I'm at the lake shore and there's boats operating, I pretty much can't hear the drone at 100 feet. If I'm in the middle of the boondocks and it's really quiet and there's not much ambient noise, yeah, that altitude is gonna be higher where I can't hear it. But really the issue is not being so high that you can't hear it at all. Because frankly, airplanes and helicopters fly over all the time. The issue is not being an annoyance that exceeds what people will experience with normal manned aircraft and helicopters. So, you know, that's really sort of shows some of the guidelines that I think about when I'm flying, and probably is a good idea for everyone to at least bear those things in mind. Not just the people operating the drones, but it is important for people, regular property owners, or any normal human in the United States of America, or the world for that matter, to really understand what drones are capable of and know what is and what isn't really threatening one's privacy. That said, the government or organizations that can afford really large, really expensive drones, actually those can have capabilities far beyond what a normal consumer drone does. And so when you're talking the military with a Predator drone, or police department, if they have the funds to get a real sophisticated drone that can carry, you know, more advanced sensors, they actually have the capability of invading someone's privacy from much greater altitudes and in much greater detail than any consumer drone can. So the bottom line, though, is we do have to be somewhat responsible as drone operators, but also as regular, normal citizens, because there are a lot of benefits that do come from drones. And frankly, the aerial photography business, if it hasn't been already, is going to be transformed by drones, because frankly, drones are capable of aerial imagery and videos that would be unsafe for manned aircraft, or in how I operate in the wilderness areas and rural areas a lot, the drone is a great way to see things that I can't see on foot without actually impacting the environment. Really the only environment impacting element to drones is noise, and it's really not that loud. It's not like you're operating a motor vehicle or an airplane or certainly a helicopter at low altitude in these areas. So really, if you think about it, there is no way to capture nature and wilderness areas better than drones, and while at the same time limiting your impact on the environment. And there are cases, a couple weeks ago, I was at Kukatali Reserve on Skagit Bay, and there are areas of that reserve that are off limits to foot traffic. And frankly, the drone was the only way that I could actually see those areas and leave no residual behind. So there are definite benefits, whether it's superior videography and photography or lack of environmental impact in seeing these natural areas. And with that, we will start flying. So first thing we're going to do today is we're going to be looking at what the drone sees at various altitudes. Right now we are at 50 feet, and this is what a person looks like from a DJI Phantom 3 at 50 feet. Now I'm helping you out. I'm wearing a cowboy hat and a bright shirt, so that should make me a little more recognizable. But as we move up to 75 feet, even smaller, realistically, if you don't know the person or they're not really standing out in some way, you can't recognize them even here at 75 feet. And that's really a key element of protected personal information, specifically that can be collected by drones, and this is really the only kind that can be. Now we're at 100 feet, and really small, in 100 feet, you can definitely notice that the drone is there if you're on the ground, especially if ambient noise is low. So there's no surreptitious surveillance at this altitude, and even if you could, you're not really seeing very much. Now we're at 125 feet. Once again, really small. I'm going to get back, move around, and this should just illustrate what drones really see. And really, people don't have to be particularly concerned about this aspect of privacy protection. It's really the annoyance factor. Here we are at 150 feet. I'm going to move back just to get myself into the center of frame, but I'm getting really tiny. Now this is 4K video, so with full resolution, you can still see that that is a human being, but that's about it. And lastly, we're going to move up to 200 feet. I'm going to move around a little bit, then I'm actually going to lay down on my back just so you can get the full view of me. This is really tiny. At 200 feet, there really should be absolutely no privacy concerns because people are completely unrecognizable at this altitude. And at 200 feet, I will also say that the sound generated by the drone isn't really that annoying, and certainly comparable to airplanes flying at much, much higher altitudes.